All right, on today's episode of Python Papi, we're back inside our TensorFlow course, and we're still doing our corrective measures module. Let's have a look at what we went over today. Now, yesterday, if you recall, we were in the process of making our models more complex, and we're going to build off that idea today. So this is our basic model here, as you can see. These are our inputs represented by 0, and this is our bias C. Mx plus C equals output, and these are our weights. So we're in the process of making that more complex. And we're going to start by doing this. So instead of just having one, we're going to stack up more neurons by removing the bias and putting new neurons, but they are doing the same thing, basically repeating the same process. Then we will link the original inputs to the new neurons, the same way they were basically linked to the bias. This will give us a new dense layer. And this is what we call our hidden layer, or the beginning of our hidden layer. So here you can see here, this is where our bias was, and we changed it into a neuron and added two new neurons. And that gave us a dense layer in the beginning of our hidden layer. From here, we can add more dense layers. So let's move down and see what that will look like. So as you can see here, from this dense layer, we go ahead and branched out to a new dense layer that gave us four new neurons. Now each of these three neurons are going to connect to each of these four new neurons. And all of them are connected. Notice how they are all linked up, and it's actually the same operation, the mx plus c. So basically we are taking this weight times the inputs plus the bias. Then we get the dense layer times this weight plus the bias, and basically continue the same operation for each dense layer added. And you can see we have our dense layer 1 and dense layer 2, and that will make up our hidden layer. So this is our hidden layer here made up of these two dense layers. We have this stacked up again. We have our first hidden layer in layer 1 and layer 2. And from here, we can even add more dense layers. So let's do that below. So as you can see, after our first two dense layers, we started another dense layer with these two new neurons. Now, every one of these four neurons here are going to connect to these two new neurons. So all of these four are going to connect to both of these. And that should make up our third dense layer. Now we have created our third hidden layer, or our third dense layer. And that's going to make up our entire hidden layer. So now we have our inputs, and we have three dense layers, not hidden layers. Sorry about that. Let me change that, because the dense layers are going to actually make up our hidden layer. Let me change that there, and we're going to change that there. So yeah, so now we have our third dense layer, and that's all three of those dense layers make up our hidden layer. So as you can see here in this graph below, so we have our inputs here, our original inputs, our first dense layer, our second dense layer, and our third dense layer. They all make up our hidden layer. And obviously, since we are just producing one single price, this will lead to our output layer. So now we have our output hidden layers that consist of three dense layers and output. Let's move down and see what that looks like. So now you can see here from our last two neurons, or our last dense layer, it led to our output. And this is that layer here, our output layer. So we have our inputs, our hidden layers, which make up our dense layer 1, dense layer 2, and this layer 3, which makes up our hidden layer that leads to our output layer here. And that was basically it for the models right now. Next, we will try to write some of the TensorFlow code to represent this. But I stopped it there. I didn't want to move too far. I did have a good amount of time dedicated to making these actual graphs and models right here. As you know, like I always say, I don't have any tools in VS Code that can actually do this for me. So I had to do this manually. And I didn't mind, because it helps me get a firmer understanding and a firmer grasp of what's going on, and actually know how these things are being handled and how these things are being produced. But of course, we're going to keep moving forward. And as we move forward, I'm going to keep you guys every step of the way as usual. But for now, this is the Python Papi, and you guys stay Gucci.